Hi everyone, my name is Kat, or the Free Librarian, and welcome to a new video. Today I will be sharing my January TBR with you. I'll start off with some stats and then talk about my books ranked from my least favorite to my most favorite. So, in the month of January, I read 10 books, good for a total of 3,215 pages. Like average page count, that is shorter than typical for me. Usually I read longer books than this, but I read a lot of short books this month. But 7 of those books I read in Dutch, 3 of them I read in English. And then a new stat for this year, I thought it would be fun to also track how many of my books were on my TBR for that month and how many were just Goodreads. I didn't end up uploading a TBR for January. I had made one. I had prepped everything for the video, but I kept putting off filming it. And then we're already over halfway through the month, and I thought it was kind of pointless to still film a TBR video then, so I just didn't bother. But I didn't make a TBR. And 5 out of the 10 books that I read this month were on that list. 5 of them were not. In terms of genre, I read 3 fantasy, 2 mystery, 2 thriller, 1 sci-fi, 1 literary fiction, and 1 historical fiction. 9 of the books were targeted at an adult audience, and 1 was YA. And then in terms of rating, I had 1 DNF, unfortunately. I had 1 2-star book, 1 2.5 star, 2 4 stars, 1 4.5 star, and 4 5 stars. So definitely a good start to the year overall. So let's get into the books, starting with my DNF and then working my way up to my favorite book of the month. So the first one that the DNF, my least favorite, is Death in a Strange Country by Donna. This is the 2nd book in the Commissario Brunetti series, and I'm really bummed because I really liked the first book in this series. I gave it 5 stars, and I thought that this could be like a series that I really love. But the 2nd book was just a bit of a letdown. There were a lot of random comments made for no reason that came out of nowhere and that kept pulling me out the story. Because there were also just things that no one would say them out loud. And just in some points it was so painfully obvious that this book was written by an American author because it's set in Venice. It's a murder mystery set in Venice. And that's where the 3rd thing came in. We were 50% through the book, or almost 50%, it was 48, and not a single clue had been found. We hadn't come a single step closer to solving the mystery, and I think 50% in, you should have found something by then, right? To call yourself a mystery. So yeah, I didn't like it. And then I talked to someone who has read this book and has read most of this series, and she told me that yeah, this is what they're like. She spoiled the ending for me. Well, I asked her to. She didn't just randomly spoil it. I asked her to spoil the ending for me, and it would have been so anticlimactic. I wouldn't totally hate the ending in like if I was liking the book, I would have been fine with that ending, but it was just so anticlimactic. And I didn't want to read it or continue reading it because I wasn't enjoying it. And she also said, like, yeah, this is what most of the books in this series are like. Like, don't expect very satisfying endings for most of them. And so I decided to just DNF the series altogether because ultimately, you know what, there are so many books out there, and just things that I've heard, I'm like, nah, I'd rather spend my time on different books. So it's unfortunate. I'll keep my good memories about book one. But yeah, Death in a Strange Country. Then I read The Cloisters by Katy Hayes. This was such a disappointment. And what's really unfortunate is I could see the potential. There was so much potential there. And I think that another author, like a more skilled author, because this is a debut, could have made this really good. But there were a lot of things that just didn't work for me. First of all, the pacing was an absolute mess. It was just so inconsistent. It started off really slow, and I have seen that as a negative, that it really drags in the beginning. I actually don't mind slow books if there's something intriguing me, that I'm fine with a slow book. But what I don't like is when a book starts off very slow and then suddenly the pacing accelerates and just the ending feels very rushed, and that was the case here. It almost felt as if Katy Hayes had decided that she wanted to write a book that was under 300 pages, and then she hit the 200-page mark, and she was like, oh, I only have 100 pages left and I have still so much story, let's just cram it all in there. And it just, there was a certain event that I wish would have happened sooner in the book, because like the aftermath, I'm trying not to spoil it, of that was definitely the most interesting part, and that way we could have spent more time on that rather than, yeah, having the slower, slightly less interesting part of the story. Also, the themes weren't very well incorporated, because this is a dark academia book that deals with tarot. And if you have tarot, then you sort of get the theme of, like, yeah, is free will versus predestination, right? And we were told that that was a theme. It was in the prologue. It was mentioned that was all about like destiny and free will and whatever. And then it was like one conversation between two characters that felt super forced that was about it. And then it was mentioned again in the epilogue. And that's it. That is all we got from this theme. We were told, hey, let's discuss this thing. And it wasn't woven very naturally into the story, I felt. And it was just put in like a few places and not consistent enough for me. Other things were also just like, yeah, I don't think any of the themes were really discussed in enough depth for me. So I didn't love that. And then there was also a thing with the atmosphere. The thing is, the atmosphere in his book is really good. And that also has to do with the writing, which is the more pretentious, which also adds to like the dark academia vibes. But it felt very forced because it's a book in first person, and I really don't think that the main character would tell the story the way that it's told and would use that narrative voice. So that was a little jarring at some places. And also just the general dark academia aesthetic was so forced in because the author really tried to capture, like, if you Google dark academia, the first 5 images that you see, she really tried to capture that. But it doesn't really work in a modern setting. I'm planning to do a whole video about this, so I'll elaborate there. But so yeah, it didn't really work for me. Unfortunately, I read this for a book club and we were all kind of disappointed in this. I mean, 2 or 3 people that already DNF'd it by the time I started, and others were like, yeah, it's kind of So yeah, there was nothing egregious about this book. I'm not mad at this book. I'm just, there was so much potential, and I'm bummed that the execution kind of fell flat for me. So I gave this 2 stars. Then I read Wintermagie, which is a short story collection by, or an anthology, I should say, by a bunch of Dutch YA fantasy authors. It's edited by Minkman. Yeah, so the premise of this was 12 short stories for like the 12 days of Christmas, and then you sort of had 1 story a day, right? So that's how I read it. So I started in December, finished it in January, and these stories just felt very underdeveloped. A lot of them felt like set up for a bigger narrative rather than a satisfying entity that stood on its own, which was kind of a shame. So I would have liked to read full-length novels where the short story is like the premise of them, or like a little prequel to the actual story. Like that would have been fine, but just them as a short story, I just don't, it didn't really work. That was most of them. There was 1 story, and I think it was Jen Minkman's own story, if I recall correctly, that just, yeah, I didn't get what the point of the story was. Like, just, I thought it was going a certain way, and I thought I understand, like, okay, this is what it's like thematically trying to do, but then something happened, and I don't understand the point of it. I don't know, it left me very, yeah, I don't know. There was 1 story though, which was the very last one, by Annette Loof, I believe her, the author was. I read this at the beginning of January. Like, the stories all sort of blend together, which is also not a very good sign. But it was the very last one, and I really, really enjoyed that one. That was definitely my favorite, which was about a girl in a wheelchair. That's the thing with this collection. It was very diverse. It had like lots of representation of all sorts of things. But she was in a wheelchair, and she really wanted to dance on this Christmas party, or this winter. It was set in winter, but she wanted to dance. And so she tried to find someone who could heal her legs to, or like some magical solution so that she could dance. And throughout reading it, it felt a little bit ableist, and I felt a little uncomfortable, but that was very much like the beginning of the arc. And sort of the author ended up playing with this idea of what she wants versus what she needs. And so like the ending I thought was really nice. So yeah, I really like that. That one's definitely my favorite story, but overall this collection was pretty disappointing and also just very forgettable. So I gave it 2.5 stars. Then I read 13 by Steve Kavanagh. This was actually the very first book I finished this year. It's a thriller, like a legal thriller about this celebrity famous person who is accused of murdering his wife. And we know that he is innocent because we also get the POV of the person who did it. And it's like a murder trial, and the killer sort of manages to force his way into the jury, and so he's in jury two of this murder trial. And so we follow that. It's actually the 4th book in a series, but they're companions. You can read them out of order. I haven't read the previous 3, and it was totally fine. But it's the Eddie Flynn series, where Eddie Flynn is the lawyer of the person who's accused of murdering his wife. Yeah, so I said we get the POV of the killer, which I thought would sort of break the tension because we couldn't really figure out who did it, but it ended up not doing that, so that was good. It really depends. Like, some authors can pull it off, some authors not so much. So, but Steve Kavanagh really did a great job with that. So yeah, it did take a while for the actual trial to start. It was a long build up to it, which wasn't bad, but I just wanted a trial, so I was just waiting for it. If this trial wasn't promised to me, and if I wasn't looking forward to that part, I probably would have liked it more. But so that, like, sort of was a little long for me personally. But then once it picked up, it really picked up, and I couldn't put it down, and I finished it like a day. Or like the rest of it, I finished it a day, I should say. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. It's not a new favorite or anything, but thrillers never are. Like, I enjoy reading them once in a while, but I'm not a thriller person necessarily, so they're never really favorites. But it's been a long time since I've enjoyed a thriller this much, so I'm happy. Steve Kavanagh did a great job. I might read more in this series, but it's not one that I like gonna read from start to finish. But if another premise sounds interesting to me, I'll definitely pick up another Eddie Flynn book. Then I read Die Frauen aus der Marktgasse, which is the first book in a historical fiction series set in the 19th century in Germany. I forgot the town. But it's about the daughter of a hat maker, or like the main character, her mother runs the hat shop, and so she works there as well. And she's really good at it, and sort of she starts to develop a friendship with one of her customers, who is this noble lady, this noble girl. She's a girl, she's not married. She's about Elise's age, who's the main character. And so things go from there. This book was not necessarily what I expected from it. The synopsis, I don't know that I would call it deceptive, but it felt like almost that, because it created different expectations from what it was. But then also I'm not sure how I would describe it in a different way without spoiling things. But this book ended up having a lot more plot than what I expected. And also, Elise doesn't know who her father is, and that becomes like an important thread because she wants to figure out. And that becomes a big part of the story. This was fun. There were some some plot conveniences. And those actually made me realize that I don't read this type of books for the plot. I read them more for the characters, and the characters were great. I liked the friendship between Elise and Sibylla, who was the other girl. So yeah, I enjoyed this, and I will definitely read the sequel at some point. And I gave this book 4 stars. Then I have Equal Rites by Terry Pratchett, which is the 3rd book in the Discworld series. The first Witches book, or the first book in the Witches series. It's about a girl who becomes a wizard, but girls can be wizard because wizards are always men, and if you're a woman, then you're a witch. Like, everyone knows that, right? But yeah, it's so we have like the sort of feminism, equal rights, women can be wizards too type thread. It was part of me wondering for a little while if there might be some like trans themes in this, whether Pratchett intended those or not. I don't know, but yeah, I really enjoyed this. It was very funny. I've only read 3 Discworld books so far because I'm going in publication order, but this was the funniest out of the 3 so far, in my opinion. It also just felt very cozy, and very familiar because it uses some familiar tropes. I love Granny Weatherwax. She is just the perfect mix of like peak country person and peak old lady. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I have The Mysterious Case of the Alperton Angels by Janice Hallett. This is a mixed media mystery story about a woman who wants to write a true crime book about this cult who convinced a teenage girl that her baby was the Antichrist, and that they needed to like ritually get rid of him, or else he would do Antichrist things in the world. I am very impressed with this book. The amount of skill it took to write was incredible. I liked the mixed media format and sort of the framing device. That was like, you've just found all of these documents. So do you hand them to the police or not? Because you have like a moral dilemma, like if you do it, then this happened, but if you don't, then this other thing will happen. So like, which one do you choose? Which I really enjoyed, which made me feel involved. So I really liked that. But what was mostly very skillfully done, I think, is this mixed media format is like a lot of emails and text messages and whatever sort of creates the possibility of a reliable or an unreliable narrator, because she might not, like, the main character might not tell everyone what she knows, or she might lie to them, and so you get different versions of the same events without this main character having to lie in their own internal monologue. So that was really well done. While reading it, I didn't like how it was focused a lot on the woman writing the book about the case and sort of the difficulties that she faced in writing it, rather than the case itself. So I wish it would focus more on the case itself rather than her writing the book. But at the end, I totally understood why that was done and it all became relevant. So even if like personal preference, I would have wished it more. It was more focused on the case. I do understand why it's done. At the time I gave it 5 stars. I'm not gonna change my rating, I think. But that I'm talking about it. Maybe I should have been more 4.5. I don't know. Either way, I'm really impressed with this. I do recommend it if it sounds interesting to you. Then the top 3. On number 3, I have Il Guardiano della Collina dei Ciliegi by Franco Faggiani, which is a literary fiction book about this Japanese athlete who participated in the marathon in the Olympics of 1912, but then he just disappeared. No one knew where he was until like 55 years later. He just showed up again and finished the marathon. This was beautiful. So we see this man who promised his family and the emperor and whatever to make his country proud, but he failed to do so, and that has decided the course of his life. He let that take over his entire life, like that sense of failure and that shame. And so we have this very bittersweet feeling because while he presents it as if he's happy, and while I think that he is happy to a certain extent, he still keeps punishing himself. And so yeah, I thought it was really well done. It really tugged on my heartstrings a few times. The descriptions of nature were very beautiful. Also just the way he describes the feeling when he's running was wonderful. So I did really like this, and I would recommend it. Unfortunately, there's no English translation at this point. I hope that'll come. We'll see. Then on number 2, I have The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, which is the first book in the Dandelion Dynasty. This was really good. I really liked the writing style and like the narrative structure of it. Ken Liu is used to writing short stories, and you can kind of tell, I think. He has this very, like, we see certain events in people's lives, but we have like big time jumps. We jump around from POV to POV. But I really liked it. I think it really worked. I liked it. I liked his characters. We have Kuni, I believe his name is, and then maybe have Mata Zindu, and their contrast like between them two was I really liked it. We have Mata, who is like old nobility and very traditional, and this is how it's always done, and this is the honorable way of doing things. And so he's very like stuck in his ways. And then you have Kuni, who gained power more recently, who sort of conned his way into power almost. And so he can think outside of the box, and he can think of new ways to fight and to conduct war. And that was also a thing I really liked, just seeing them find new and innovative ways to win this war and to fight this war. Yeah, I really liked that. Also, we have like inventions being invented to help with this war, and I thought it was really good. I really liked the world building. Like what we got of it, I really enjoyed, so I hope we'll get a little bit more of that. It did read a little bit like a history book at times, which I'd heard, which I don't mind. I liked it, and this was sort of Ken Liu trying to set up a few things, and then in book 2, like the actual story starts. It is sort of like a prequel to the actual story. But I really enjoyed it. I'm really excited to continue reading, and I gave this 5 stars. And then the final book, my favorite of the month, is a comic, which is The Space Race of 1869 by Alex Alice. This is the first book in the Castle in the Stars series. It's a historical sci-fi about a space race in 1869. And they have a substance called ether that they use to fly. And so yeah, I really enjoyed it. I liked the plot. It was really fun, with like fun twists and turns. It was a little predictable at times, but it was just a lot of fun. I liked the characters. We follow this boy whose mother died in, well, the book starts with his mother going up in the air to collect ether because it's really high up in the sky, but she never came back. But she did drop her notes, and so like we have our notes, and so that's how we do the invention and stuff. And then we have this other party who wants to steal the inventions and stuff. Space race. But what I really loved about this book the most are the illustrations. They were so freaking beautiful. I really, really loved them. The tagline of this book was like Jules Verne meets Miyazaki, and it, like, the art style does remind me of a Studio Ghibli film. Ghibli. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Yeah, just the colors were beautiful, very vibrant. I really, really enjoyed it. The art is stunning. I just had to stop sometimes and just look at the illustrations for a minute because it was so beautiful. Which became very hard because by the end it came a little bit page turnery. So it was very like, do I keep reading or do I stop to look at images? Dilemmas. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to reading the second volume in this. And I gave this a well-deserved 5 stars. So that is the wrap-up of the month. Have you read any of these books? If so, let me know your thoughts. Also, let me know what your favorite book of January was, and I will see you again in another video.